It was supposed to be a surprise birthday, one that Jack Carter, a war veteran, had planned for months after coming home from duty. But when he opened the old shed behind the house, his heart froze. There, Emily, his disabled daughter, was sitting alone on the cold floor, holding a cracked plate with a small piece of bread and a single candle stuck in the middle. No laughter, no balloons, only silence and her faint whisper, singing herself happy birthday. And in that moment, Jack realized, some battles aren't fought on battlefields, but inside our own homes. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the stories that remind us love still exists. Wishing you a warm and peaceful day. The wind that night in Silver Creek carried the kind of silence that made even memories hesitate to breathe. Snow drifted like dust from heaven, soft and endless, blanketing the pine-covered valley in pale white. Jack Carter, a veteran with the stillness of someone who had seen too much of war, gripped the steering wheel of his old truck as it climbed the narrow road toward home. 2 years of service abroad had left their marks, a few more scars, a little less sleep, and a heart that had been counting down the days to one simple promise: his daughter's birthday. In the passenger seat, Rex, his German shepherd, lay quietly, his amber eyes half closed but alert, a creature molded by loyalty and loss alike. Jack had rehearsed this homecoming 1,000 times in his mind, the knock on the door, the gasp of surprise, the laughter that would follow. Emily's face would light up, the same way it once did when she was still small enough to ride on his shoulders through the snow. She was 5 now, fragile but fierce, with one metal leg and a pair of crutches that had become her wings. After the accident that took her mother and her leg, she had learned to move differently, to see the world from lower angles and higher strength. Jack had promised himself that this birthday would remind her she was never forgotten, that love had not gone missing even when he was half a world away. When he turned into the familiar driveway, the house stood still against the storm, dark and hollow, as if time had stopped inside it. No warm light in the window, no stream of laughter, no sign of a celebration. His chest tightened with confusion. He parked and stepped out, boots sinking into the powdery snow, the air slicing cold against his breath. "Emily," he called, voice low but hopeful. Nothing, only the sound of wind brushing against the eaves. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, body tense. Then, without a sound, he broke into a sudden sprint toward the backyard. Jack followed the dog's tracks through the snow, his heart beginning to race in rhythm with the pounding of his boots. Rex stopped near the old shed, a small weather-worn building once used to store tools and firewood. A thin, trembling glow leaked through the cracks of its wooden door. The sight of light should have been reassuring, but something in that dim flicker set every nerve in Jack's body on edge. "Rex," he whispered, but the dog didn't move, only growled softly, his tail stiff, his eyes locked on the door. When Jack pushed the door open, it creaked with a tired groan, the hinges brittle from years of neglect. The air inside smelled of damp wood and cold metal. For a moment, he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Then his eyes adjusted to the dim, flickering light, and his breath caught. On the dusty floor sat Emily, his daughter. She was small, wrapped in a sweater that looked too thin for the cold, her crutches leaning beside her. On a cracked porcelain plate lay a slice of dry bread, a pink candle stuck in the center, its flame trembling against the dark. She was whispering to herself, a shaky, off-key version of "Happy Birthday." Jack froze where he stood. Every instinct screamed to move, to reach her, to gather her into his arms. But for a second, he could only watch, the surreal stillness of that moment pinning him in place. The candlelight danced across Emily's face, revealing tear tracks on her cheeks. Her small hands clasped tightly around the plate, as if it were something sacred. When she saw him, she didn't smile. She simply looked up, startled, her lips parting but no words coming out. Then Rex padded forward quietly and lay beside her, pressing his head against her leg. That simple touch broke the spell. "Emily," Jack's voice cracked as he knelt beside her. "What are you doing out here, sweetheart?" The little girl blinked, her eyes glassy, her voice almost a whisper. "It's my birthday," she said. "I didn't want to forget." Her words fell heavy between them, and Jack felt his throat tighten until breathing became an effort. "Where's Miss Vivian?" he asked softly. "In the house," Emily murmured, her fingers brushing Rex's fur. "She said I should stay here. It's quieter. She said I like quiet things." Before Jack could answer, footsteps crunched across the patio stones behind him. A woman's voice, smooth and composed, floated through the cold air. "Jack," she said, her tone as soft as silk, yet cold enough to cut through bone. He turned. Vivian Hale, 38, elegant, tall, and deliberate, stood in the doorway, a beige robe cinched neatly around her waist, a cup of steaming tea in one hand. Her hair was sleek black, tied in a perfect knot, her smile poised like a mask she'd worn for years. Once, she had been his late wife's friend, the one who offered help after the accident. Now she was Emily's guardian, by law, if not by heart. "I didn't expect you tonight," she said smoothly, taking a slow sip of her tea. "You should have called. You might have startled her." Jack's jaw tensed. "What's going on here?" he asked quietly. Vivian tilted her head, her smile tightening. "She likes it down here," she replied calmly. "Says it feels safe. Children need routine, Jack. I was just about to bring her dinner." Her tone carried the gentle condescension of someone explaining a recipe to a child. Jack's fists curled at his sides. He glanced around the shed. Bare walls, a broken chair, no sign of warmth or care. "This is her birthday," he said, his voice low but steady. "A slice of bread and a candle in a storage shed. That's your idea of safe?" Vivian's eyes flickered, but the smile never faltered. "You're overreacting again," she said lightly. "You always did have a flair for drama. The child is fine, aren't you, Emily?" She looked down, her lips trembling. Rex growled quietly, sensing the unease in the air. Jack stood, the weight of years in his posture, the soldier in him simmering beneath the father's restraint. "Get out of here," he said evenly. Vivian blinked, feigning confusion. "Excuse me?" "Go inside," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Now." There was no anger in his tone, only something far more dangerous. Resolve. For a brief moment, Vivian's composure cracked. She turned away sharply and walked back toward the house, her figure dissolving into the white haze of falling snow. Jack knelt again beside Emily. She had begun to cry silently, her small shoulders trembling. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, his hand gentle but shaking. "It's all right," he whispered. "You're safe now." She leaned forward and hugged him, her tiny arms barely reaching around his neck. Rex rested his head against both of them, the three of them a small, fragile shape against the cold world around them. As the candle flickered one last time and went out, Jack looked down at his daughter's tear-streaked face and realized that what he had come home to was not a celebration. It was a rescue, not just of a child, but of a childhood stolen too soon. In the soft glow of the dying flame, he made a silent promise. Whatever it took, Emily would never spend another birthday alone. The snow had not stopped falling when Jack carried Emily to his truck, her small body wrapped in his old military jacket. The cold bit through the fabric, but she didn't shiver. She only held tightly to the stuffed bear in her arms, while Rex circled anxiously around them, barking once into the empty night. The house behind them stood dark and still, its windows reflecting nothing but the pale white of the storm. Jack didn't look back. He fastened his daughter's seatbelt, started the engine, and drove into the forest road that wound toward the cabin, the one he had left behind years ago after his wife's accident. The tires cut through the snow in slow determination, headlights sweeping across the frozen trees like ghosts leading them home. The cabin appeared after an hour of driving, a lonely shape beneath a canopy of frost-heavy pines. Jack remembered every detail, the chipped green shutters, the chimney tilting slightly, the scent of pine resin trapped in the walls. It was a place that had once held laughter, the soft hum of his wife's voice, and the tiny footsteps of a little girl learning to walk. Now it was just wood and memory, waiting to be filled again. When he opened the door, a gust of stale, cold air greeted them. He set Emily down on the old couch near the hearth and began stacking firewood. Rex sat beside her, head resting on her lap as if to promise she wasn't alone anymore. It took nearly 30 minutes before the cabin began to warm. The fire snapped and crackled, throwing gold light across the walls. Emily's eyes followed the sparks, her face still and unreadable. Jack placed a bowl of soup on the table, the steam curling into the air. "You should eat, sweetheart," he said softly. She didn't move until Rex stood up and nudged the bowl with his nose. Only then did she pick up the spoon, taking small, careful sips, her other hand resting gently on Rex's neck. Jack sat opposite her, watching in silence. Each bite felt like a victory, a fragile thread pulling her back toward safety. When she finished half the bowl, her voice broke the quiet for the first time that night. "Are we staying here?" she asked, her tone cautious, like the question itself might cause trouble. Jack nodded. "Just for a while," he said, "until I figure things out." Emily looked at the window, at the endless curtain of snow beyond. "Does she know we left?" she whispered. Jack hesitated, then reached across the table and took her hand. "Not yet," he said, "but you don't have to worry about her anymore." She looked down, fingers curling slightly, as if she didn't quite believe him. Later, after Emily had fallen asleep under the old quilt in the loft, Jack sat near the fire with his phone in hand. His contact list was short. Most names belonged to men from his unit, not people who could help him now. Then he remembered a voice from before everything fell apart. Clara Jennings, Emily's teacher. She had been the one who sent postcards during deployment, little updates about the class, tiny drawings signed, "From the kids." She had also been the first to stop by after the accident when Jack couldn't speak without shaking. He found her number, took a breath, and called. It was nearly midnight, but Clara answered on the third ring. Her voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that made people feel like they were still salvageable. "Jack Carter," she said after a pause. "I hoped I'd hear from you again someday. How's Emily?" Jack hesitated, the truth too heavy to summarize. "Not good," he said simply. "I need help." There was no hesitation on her end. "Where are you?" "The old cabin," he replied, "in the woods off Mill Creek Road." "I'll be there in the morning," she said. "And Jack, don't let her be alone tonight." When morning came, the world outside was white and still, as if time itself had frozen with the storm. Emily was awake early, sitting by the window with Rex at her feet. She watched the snow with an expression that wasn't quite wonder, more like quiet disbelief. Jack brewed coffee, the scent filling the small room, and warmed milk for her. "A friend of ours is coming today," he said. "Her name's Clara. You remember her?" Emily shook her head slowly. "She used to be your teacher." A flicker of recognition crossed her face, or maybe just curiosity. "Will she be mad?" she asked softly. "No," Jack said, smiling faintly. "Clara doesn't get mad. She listens." By the time Clara arrived, the snow had softened into a steady drizzle of flakes. She was in her late 30s, tall and slim, her auburn hair tucked under a wool hat, her cheeks pink from the cold. She carried a thermos, a sketchbook, and a bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon and paper. Her eyes, green and bright, met Jack's with a quiet kind of understanding. No judgment, only recognition. "You look tired," she said gently. "You look like someone who hasn't stopped fighting." Jack exhaled a small laugh. "That's about right." Clara glanced toward the loft. "Can I see her?" Emily peeked down the stairs as Clara approached, half hiding behind the railing. "Hi there," Clara said softly, crouching to her level. "I'm Miss Clara. I used to teach you about colors and shapes. Do you still like drawing?" Emily hesitated, clutching Rex's collar. Clara smiled, opening the sketchbook. "I brought something for you. Blank pages. You can draw anything you want, even if it's just scribbles." Emily slowly descended the stairs, her crutches clicking softly against the wood. She took the book with both hands and whispered, "Thank you." Rex wagged his tail once as if approving the truce. As the day went on, the cabin began to feel less like a shelter and more like a small home being rebuilt piece by piece. Clara warmed milk on the stove and poured it into 2 mugs, sliding one to Emily. "Do you remember what your favorite color was?" she asked casually. "Blue," Emily said after a pause, "like the snow when it's not white." Clara nodded. "That's a beautiful answer." She set crayons on the table. "You can show me what blue feels like." Emily started to draw, her strokes slow, deliberate. The picture began to take shape. A small square room with no windows, a single candle, and a figure standing on a staircase above it. Jack watched from the doorway, his stomach tightening as each line emerged. Clara didn't interrupt. She only murmured encouragement, her expression unreadable. When Emily finally stopped, she pushed the paper forward. "That's my house," she said. "That's her." The figure on the stairs was tall, with a sharp outline of hair tied in a bun, unmistakably Vivian. Jack felt something heavy rise in his chest. "Did she ever hurt you?" he asked quietly. Emily shook her head, then whispered, "Only if I talked about you." The words hit him harder than any wound he'd taken in combat. He turned away, facing the window where the snow had started to fall again. Clara rose, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You're doing the right thing, Jack," she said. "She's safe now. That's what matters." He nodded, unable to speak. In the corner, Rex lifted his head and gave a soft, reassuring bark, as if to remind them that they weren't alone in this fight. That night, as Emily slept with Rex curled protectively at her side, Jack sat by the fire, staring into the slow dying embers. Clara had gone back to town with a promise to return the next day. The cabin was quiet again, but no longer empty. He could still hear Emily's voice from earlier, soft and uncertain. She said, "I like quiet things." He looked at the sketch on the table, the room, the candle, the staircase, and whispered to himself, "Not anymore, sweetheart. Not anymore." Outside, the snow whispered against the windows, a fragile peace settling over the forest, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Morning light filtered weakly through the frosted windows of the cabin, streaking across the floorboards in pale gold. The fire from the night before had burned to embers, and the air smelled faintly of ash and pine. Jack sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, watching Emily and Rex play quietly on the rug. She was stacking wooden blocks while the dog watched, his tail thumping gently against the floor. For the first time since their return, her face seemed softer, not quite smiling, but no longer haunted. It was a fragile calm, and Jack would have given anything to keep it. He had begun cleaning the cabin, organizing what little he'd brought back from his storage unit. Old boxes filled the corners, one with photographs of his wife, another with his army medals, and a third with Emily's childhood toys. When he opened the last one, the faint scent of baby powder and lavender drifted out, carrying memories of a gentler time. "Look what I found," he said, pulling out a worn teddy bear with a beige bow around its neck. Emily froze. "That's mine," she whispered, her voice trembling with both surprise and recognition. She reached for it instantly, clutching it to her chest. Rex tilted his head, his ears twitching. He stepped closer, sniffing the bear curiously, then pawed at it once, whining softly. Emily frowned and pulled it back protectively. "It's okay, boy," Jack said with a half-smile, but the dog didn't back away. His nose pressed against the toy again, more insistent this time, and he let out a short, low growl, not of anger, but of warning. Jack's soldier instincts sparked awake. "Easy, Rex," he murmured, gently taking the bear from Emily's hands. It felt heavier than it should have. He turned it over, fingers running along the seams until he found something, a small, hard bump stitched into the fabric near the paw. A chill ran down his spine. Jack reached for his pocket knife, flicked it open, and made a careful cut along the seam. Threads unraveled, and a metallic glint caught the light. Embedded inside was a miniature recorder, no bigger than a thumb drive, with a blinking red dot barely visible under the fur. Emily's eyes widened. "What is it?" she asked. Jack didn't answer right away. He set the bear gently on the table, plugged the recorder into his old laptop, and waited. The screen flickered, showing one audio file. He pressed play. At first, only static filled the room. Then, a voice broke through, cold, measured, and unmistakable. Vivian Hale. "Listen carefully, Emily," the recording said. The woman's tone was syrup-sweet, the kind that made cruelty sound like care. "You don't talk to anyone about your father, not your teacher, not the neighbors. If you do, they'll take you away, far away. You'll never see your sister again." Emily flinched, pressing her hands over her ears. Jack froze, his jaw locking so tight it hurt. The next few seconds were silence, followed by a faint sniffle, Emily's voice tiny and scared. "But I miss him," the child in the recording whispered. Vivian's reply came sharp as ice. "He left because he wanted to. Now stop crying. Say it. You don't talk about him." Emily's recorded voice quivered. "I don't talk about him." The file ended there, cutting to static again. Jack's eyes burned. He shut the laptop, his hands shaking. For a long moment he said nothing, just sat there, staring at the bear lying limp on the table. The weight of it all pressed down like the mountain outside. Emily watched him, uncertain, afraid she had done something wrong. He reached across the table, took her hand, and pulled her close. "You didn't do anything bad," he whispered. "You were brave." She nodded, but her tears came anyway, silent and raw. Rex climbed onto the bench beside them, placing his head on her lap as if sealing the promise that she was safe now. When the storm outside began to ease, Jack picked up his phone and called Clara. She answered on the first ring, sensing the urgency in his voice. "Clara, it's Jack. I found something," he explained, each word measured but trembling beneath restraint. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Clara's voice came firm. "You need to keep that file safe. I'll bring someone who can help." "Who?" "Rachel Moore," she said. "She's a lawyer, works with veterans' families. The real kind, not the ones that just sign papers. She's seen things like this before." Jack exhaled slowly. "All right. Tell her I'll send the recording." Within an hour, he had uploaded the audio file and forwarded it to both Clara and Rachel. The waiting was unbearable. He paced the small cabin, staring out the window where the trees stood frozen in silence. Rex followed him back and forth, sensing the tension. Every time a branch cracked under the weight of snow, the dog's ears perked, his muscles taut. It was as if he too understood that the quiet never stayed safe for long. Emily, exhausted, had fallen asleep on the couch, the patched teddy bear still in her arms. The phone rang again just after dusk. Rachel Moore's voice came through, calm but clipped with focus. She was in her early 40s, a woman whose words carried both warmth and steel. "Jack, I listened to it," she said. "That's not just manipulation. That's psychological abuse and coercive control. You've got evidence of emotional isolation, intimidation, and deprivation of care. If that's the Guardian on record, it's serious." Jack rubbed his forehead, his pulse pounding. "What do I do next?" Rachel didn't hesitate. "I'm filing an emergency petition for temporary custody and protection under state statute, but you'll need to stay alert. People like her don't back down easily." Clara arrived the next morning, her car tires crunching over fresh snow. Rachel was with her, tall, sharply dressed in a dark gray coat and boots, her briefcase tucked under her arm. Her presence filled the small cabin not with noise but with authority. She greeted Jack with a firm handshake, then knelt briefly beside Emily, offering a gentle smile. "Hi there," she said softly. "You're safe now, sweetheart. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Emily looked at her for a long moment before nodding slightly, her fingers tightening around Rex's fur. Rachel straightened and turned to Jack. "I'll handle the legal side. You just keep her calm." That afternoon was a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Rachel made copies of the recording, drafted affidavits, and contacted the county office for child protection verification. Clara prepared food and kept Emily distracted with coloring books, though the child rarely spoke. Outside, the forest wind had changed, sharper, colder. Rex began growling intermittently, pacing near the window. Jack looked up from signing a form. "What is it, boy?" The dog didn't answer, of course, but his stance said enough. Ears pinned, muscles coiled, he stared out toward the tree line where the shadows didn't move naturally. As night fell, Rachel packed up her briefcase. "I'll head back to town tonight and file first thing in the morning," she said. "Lock your doors, Jack. And if Rex reacts again, trust him. Dogs sense things before we do." Jack walked her to the truck, the cold cutting through his jacket. "You think she'll try something?" he asked quietly. Rachel met his eyes. "Vivian knows she's losing control. People like that get desperate when they're cornered." She got in the truck and drove off, her taillights fading into the white darkness. Inside, Jack checked the locks and pulled the curtains shut. Rex lay near the door, still restless. Emily was asleep again, but this time her breathing was deeper, steadier. Jack sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, not from paranoia, but from instinct. Through the snow-glazed glass, he thought he saw movement, the faint glint of headlights far down the road. He didn't move, only whispered to the dog beside him, "Stay close, boy." Rex lifted his head, eyes burning like embers in the dark. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine cut off. The forest fell silent. Snow fell heavier that morning, blanketing the pines around the cabin until the world seemed muted, as if holding its breath. Jack sat by the fire, sifting through legal documents Rachel had sent overnight. The crackling of wood was the only sound, save for the rhythmic ticking of the clock above the mantel. He was due to meet Rachel in town within the hour to finalize the custody motion. Emily was coloring quietly by the window, Rex lying at her feet, his tail sweeping slowly across the rug. Everything looked calm, too calm, and Jack couldn't shake the unease that crept at the edges of his mind. Before he left, he knelt beside his daughter, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "I'll be back before dinner, okay?" he said. Emily nodded, eyes focused on her drawing. "Clara's staying with you," Jack added. "You'll be safe." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that was more habit than joy. Rex nudged her hand, and she gave his ear a small scratch. "Good boy," she whispered. Jack stood, slinging on his coat. Clara arrived moments later, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Don't worry," she told him gently. "We'll be fine." Jack hesitated only a moment before driving off into the white haze. Miles away, in a house of polished marble and soft deceit, Vivian Hale stood by her window, staring out at the gray horizon. She looked composed, silk blouse, hair pinned, lipstick perfect, but her reflection in the glass betrayed the cracks beneath. She knew what was coming. Investigations, custody hearings, exposure. Her calm was the brittle kind that breaks under silence. On her desk lay a letter, carefully worded, addressed to Jack Carter. "I only wish to explain. For Emily's sake. Please meet me." Her handwriting was steady, even elegant, a mask of sincerity crafted with care. But behind the facade, another plan was already in motion. In her garage, a man in a dark jacket leaned against a white cargo truck, tapping a cigarette against his thumb. He was in his 30s, rough-edged, his eyes dull with the look of someone who stopped asking questions long ago. "You're sure about this?" he muttered. Vivian handed him an envelope thick with cash. "The girl will be outside the cabin by noon," she said coolly. "No one gets hurt. Bring her to me, then disappear." The man nodded once, pocketed the envelope, and flicked his cigarette into the snow. He didn't notice, or didn't care, how her hands trembled once the engine roared to life. Back in the forest, Clara tidied up the small cabin while Emily played near the fire. Rex followed her every move, tail lowered, ears twitching toward the window. It wasn't like him to be restless indoors. Clara noticed, but dismissed it at first. "You're guarding us, aren't you?" she said with a small smile. The dog didn't react, only paced back and forth, sniffing the doorframe, then growling low in his throat. The sound chilled her. "Rex?" she whispered, walking closer. The German shepherd turned sharply toward the woods outside, his fur bristling, a deep bark tearing from his chest. Clara's heart leapt. Something, or someone, was out there. Through the curtain's gap, she saw the faint outline of a truck idling near the tree line, its headlights off. Panic surged through her. "Emily, sweetheart, stay right here," she said quickly, reaching for her phone. Her fingers trembled as she called Jack. He picked up on the second ring. "Clara." "Jack, there's someone outside. A truck. Rex is going crazy." The urgency in her voice hit him like a siren. "Lock the doors," he ordered. "I'm on my way. Call the sheriff." She nodded, already dialing. Outside, Rex barked furiously, circling near the window, ready to defend. Minutes later, the sound of footsteps crunched through the snow. The cabin door rattled once, then again. Clara grabbed a fireplace poker, standing between Emily and the noise. "Go away," she shouted, voice breaking. The handle turned but didn't open. She'd locked it just in time. From outside came a muffled voice, rough and impatient. "Open up, lady. I'm here for the kid." Emily whimpered, clutching Rex's collar. The dog growled, a deep primal sound that filled the room. Then the window at the back shattered. The man's arm reached through, fumbling for the latch, but Rex was faster. He lunged, jaws clamping down hard on the intruder's sleeve. A shout of pain echoed through the cabin. Clara yanked Emily toward the front, shouting into her phone. "He's trying to break in. Hurry!" Sirens were faint in the distance, growing louder. Outside, the man stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm. "Enough!" he snarled, retreating toward the truck. Emily, crying now, pressed her face into Clara's coat. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, though her own hands were shaking. The truck's engine revved, wheels spinning against the snow as it backed up the narrow trail. But Rex broke free, charging through the open door into the storm. Clara screamed his name, but the dog was gone, a blur of black and tan vanishing into white. By the time Jack's truck appeared through the blizzard, the police cruiser was right behind him, blue lights flashing through the trees. Clara waved frantically from the porch, shouting over the wind. "They took her! They took Emily!" Jack's blood ran cold. He leapt from his truck, following the tire tracks down the path. The forest echoed with barking, fierce, relentless. Up ahead, the cargo truck struggled through the snow, its driver swearing as Rex appeared in front of the headlights, snarling, refusing to move. "Get out of the way!" the man shouted, slamming the brakes. The truck skidded sideways and came to a halt. Jack and Deputy Allen, a broad-shouldered officer with a weathered face, closed in, guns drawn. Jack's heart hammered as he reached the driver's side. Inside, Emily was sobbing, trapped in the man's grip. "Let her go!" Jack bellowed. The driver hesitated, panicked. Rex leapt at the door, barking furiously, snapping at the man's arm. The officer lunged, pulling the door open and dragging the kidnapper out. Jack rushed in, scooping Emily into his arms as she cried uncontrollably, clinging to him with both hands. "You're okay, sweetheart. I've got you. You're safe now," he whispered, voice breaking. Rex circled them, whining softly, tail low but steady. By dawn, the chaos had settled into silence. Vivian Hale was arrested that same night, her letter to Jack found on her desk beside a one-way train ticket. At the station, Rachel's voice cut through the noise, calm, commanding, and resolute, as she handed over the evidence, the recording, the attempted abduction report, the hired man's confession. "This isn't misunderstanding," she told the sheriff. "It's control. It's cruelty. And it ends tonight." Outside, Jack stood holding Emily, Rex sitting beside them like a sentinel. Snow began to fall again, softer now, almost gentle, as the flashing lights painted the forest in blue and red. Winter melted slowly in Silver Creek, the snow thinning along the winding forest roads where it once stood thick as silence. The trial had ended only a week before, but to Jack Carter, it felt like a lifetime had passed since the night the sirens echoed through the trees. In the courthouse, beneath pale lights and polished oak, the judge had spoken the words he would never forget. Custody granted in full to the father, Jack Carter. Vivian Hale sat motionless, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression a cold mask of defeat. 6 years in prison, followed by 10 years barred from working or being near minors. No plea, no apology. When the gavel struck, it was more than justice. It was release. Outside, the morning sun had barely risen. Reporters murmured, papers rustled, but Jack barely heard them. Emily clung to his coat, her tiny hands gripping tightly as if afraid someone might still take her away. Rachel Moore, steady as always, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she said quietly. Jack looked down at his daughter. "No," he murmured, voice rough. "We did." Rex stood beside them, his leg newly braced in a soft steel support, tail flicking gently. The dog had become something more than a companion. He was a living reminder of courage, loyalty, and survival. Back at the cabin, the world felt peaceful again, the forest whispering like an old friend returning after a storm. Emily had begun to walk more confidently on her prosthetic leg, the rhythmic click of her crutch no longer hesitant but purposeful. She spent long afternoons by the window with her sketchbook, filling pages with drawings of light, candles, lanterns, fireflies, always glowing against the snow. When Jack asked her about them, she only smiled and said, "Because light doesn't get scared anymore." He would nod, pretending his eyes weren't wet, and Rex would rest his chin on her knee as if agreeing. Clara visited often, bringing warmth and laughter that the cabin had missed for too long. She'd help Emily mix paints, teaching her how to turn white into every shade of hope, soft blues, tender golds, even the pale pink of sunrise. Sometimes she'd stay late, sharing coffee with Jack as Rex dozed at their feet. "You know," she said one evening, looking toward the little girl at the table, "I used to think I was just a teacher, but now I think maybe I was waiting to see what kindness really looks like." Jack smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "You found it," he said softly. "Right there." One afternoon, Rachel drove out to the cabin with official papers. The custody confirmation, signed and sealed. She handed them to Jack, her expression both proud and tired. "This part's over," she said. "But what you do next? That's what will matter." Jack stared at the document for a long time. "I don't just want her to heal," he said quietly. "I want other kids to have what she didn't." "A way out," Rachel nodded. "Then start with one small door, Jack. Sometimes that's all a child needs. One door open." Weeks passed. The snow began to melt, revealing muddy paths and the first hints of green beneath the frost. The townsfolk of Silver Creek, once distant, began to stop by, some to congratulate, others to offer help. Jack and Clara started clearing out an old building near the edge of town, a weathered structure once used as a ranger outpost. Together, they cleaned, painted, and repaired it until it no longer looked forgotten. A hand-painted sign was placed above the door. Silver Creek Center. Beneath it, in smaller letters, read the promise that defined everything they had fought for. No one should suffer in silence. The center opened quietly one spring morning. No ceremony, no speeches, just open doors and warm light spilling across the wooden floor. Inside were shelves of donated toys, art supplies, and books. A small clinic room stood in the back for trauma support and counseling. Clara managed the educational programs, while Jack worked with local veterans who volunteered to help. "You'd be surprised," he told Clara one day, "how many of us came back from war just looking for something to protect again." She smiled. "Maybe this time, it's not about fighting. It's about rebuilding." Emily became the heart of the center, her laughter echoing in the halls. Though she still used her crutch, her steps grew stronger, her spirit brighter. She'd often sit with new children who came in, those who didn't speak much at first, and draw beside them in quiet solidarity. "You don't have to talk," she'd tell them. "Just draw your heart. The paper can listen." One of her favorite drawings hung on the wall, a small candle burning in a sea of white snow, its flame steady and unafraid. Beneath it, in childlike handwriting, she had written, "The light belongs to everyone." Rex never left her side. His braced leg healed, though he still limped slightly, a badge of loyalty that no one tried to erase. At night, he slept by her bed, head resting near her crutch as if guarding her dreams. Jack would sometimes pause at the door, watching them, the soft rhythm of the girl's breathing, the rise and fall of the dog's chest. It was peace in its purest form. And for a man who had spent too many nights in war zones, that silence meant more than victory ever could. When Emily's next birthday arrived, the world outside was green and full of promise. Friends from the center gathered in the garden, laughter weaving through the air. Clara strung up paper lanterns, and Rachel arrived with a cake covered in vanilla frosting and bright candles. Emily stood at the center of it all, a paper crown on her head, Rex wearing a matching party hat that kept slipping over one ear. As the sun dipped low behind the pines, Jack knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Go on," he whispered. "Make a wish." She closed her eyes, took a breath, and blew, the flames flickering, then vanishing into golden smoke. Jack smiled, his voice low but full of warmth. "You did it, Emily. This time, the light belongs to you." In the quiet corners of life, true heroism often wears no uniform and asks for no reward. It lives in fathers who refuse to give up, in teachers who choose compassion over judgment, and in loyal friends, even those with 4 legs, who stand guard through the darkest nights. Jack, Emily, and Rex remind us that kindness and silent sacrifice can rebuild what cruelty once destroyed. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us what it made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that love, courage, and faith still live in this world. May God bless you and protect every heart that still believes in goodness.